David Cornell was born and spent his early years in Houston, Texas, before moving to Devon, PA. Following his graduation from the Episcopal Academy in 1982, David attended Trinity University in San Antonio, Texas, where he received a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration. He has over 25 years of business management and counseling experience. He was co-founder of a commercial printing, facilities management, and document service company. Previously, he spent more than a decade with Arthur Anderson and with the BSG Alliance IT, where he designed and implemented client server system infrastructures for companies in the oil and gas transmission, financial, end-of-life, and oil field services industry. He served on the board of directors of the American One Television Network and was previously the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of the USFR Media Group, which owned Cowboys and Indians magazine and Houston's Channel 55, among other properties. David currently resides in Houston with his wife Jennifer and their 2 young daughters, Vivian and Sophia. Please stand to greet David Cornell.
Thanks for having me here today. A 58-year-old man sits alone at a desk in a 1-bedroom apartment. His childhood kitchen table serves as his desk. To his name, he has a closet full of suits, white shirts, some ties, and scant else in the way of amenities. Armed with a phone, an idea, an unstinting work ethic, and a core ethical belief that integrity, defined as doing the right thing regardless of cost, is more important than success at any cost, he dials a phone trying to line up his fledgling company's first deal. The man has left 2 C-level positions when asked to do things that went against his code of ethics. 40 years earlier, he left home with nothing but a pair of blue jeans and 5 white shirts. He rose through the ranks of corporate power. He knows he can do it again. 8 years later, his company is listed on the New York Stock Exchange, and his 1-bedroom apartment has been traded for a 22-acre estate in Aspen. Even though the road may be bumpy and indirect at times, the good guys do win. The man was my father and namesake, David M. Cornell. 34 years ago, he had the foresight to send me to Episcopal Academy in 1978. I am forever grateful to him for the environment he placed me in and the lessons I learned here and at home. What has been most interesting to me, however, is that the single most influential class that I took here was taught by a young teacher whom you all know now, as I did then, as Reverend Squire. The course was ethics. If you have an opportunity to take the course, pay attention. The lessons taught in it will come again and again and again. I distinctly remember walking down the lane of the Old Marion campus as a graduating senior and musing that at that point in time I knew more about biology, physics, chemistry, calculus, English literature, and art than most of the inhabitants of the world that were there then, and certainly more than any prior generation. Attending an elite educational institution such as Episcopal arms you with all the answers to all the questions presented to you. The larger uninsulated world outside of Episcopal Academy's hallowed halls and your parents' seemingly restrictive oversight, however, presents you with very complex questions that don't follow simple formulas. Ethical quandaries actually creep up on you. If you place a frog into boiling water, it will immediately jump out. If you raise the temperature slowly in an incremental fashion, you can boil it alive. Don't Get Boiled Alive could be the title of my talk today. I never in my wildest dreams would have thought I would have a front row seat to some of the greatest and sensational ethical lapses in America over the past decade or so. Once great proud companies and institutions violated ethical codes and are no longer in existence. Their leaders went from the smartest guys in the room to just another couple guys in the cell. There is nothing wrong with being smart and highly educated. There is plenty wrong with being unethical. Let's take a look at a couple of examples of some companies I've worked for directly as a consultant or as a service provider before they disintegrated years later under a cloud of disgrace. Enron. Richard Kinder, president and CEO from 1990 to when he was basically forced out in 1996 because he saw the future of the business was in pipelines, while Richard Skilling, Ken Lay, and Andrew Fastow thought Indo should own nothing and trade in everything. Richard Kinder, the man who believed in being versus seeming, is currently worth $8.2 billion. On the other end of the spectrum, the names Enron, Lay, Fastow, and Skilling are now synonymous with willful corporate fraud and corruption. Ken Lay died disgraced before his adjudication, but Richard Skilling, Enron's former president and COO, is still in the federal penitentiary, and Andrew Fastow, Enron's former CFO, was recently released after serving 6 years in jail. 20,000 people were out of work because of the hubris and ethical lapses of a few men. Arthur Andersen and Company, once the largest and most conservative of the Big Six accounting firms, is no longer in existence. I sincerely doubt that in 1996, Lay, Fastow, and Skilling said, hey, let's trash the lives of 20,000 employees and countless investors, contractors, and others, but through their ethical lapses, lapse after lapse, they created an ever larger house of cards that came crumbling down. Stanford Financial Group. R. Allen Stanford was a prominent financier in Texas who initially made a large fortune with his father by investing in distressed real estate properties in Houston, Texas during the 1980s. In the early 2000s, he invested in a media company where I was an investor. I was also executive vice president, COO, and on the board of directors. Our company was real. We had assets in television and publishing. Following an ethics dispute with some of the other board members and other investors, I resigned. I, along with a number of core original investors, eventually spun out our assets and severed our ties with the company. 3 months later, it was revealed that Mr. Stanford did not come by the money he invested in our company, and countless others for that matter, through legitimate means. While we escaped unscathed, many who entrusted Mr. Stanford with their life savings did not. R. Allen Stanford is currently serving a 110-year prison sentence, having been convicted of charges that his investment company was a massive Ponzi scheme and fraud. Mr. Stanford started out on the right path, but continued to veer off it, way off it. John B. Goodman, billionaire heir to the Goodman manufacturing fortune. John and I are the same age. We played lacrosse against each other in the Texas Club Leagues. We invested in the same company and were on its board together. Sadly, somewhere along the way, John got addicted to alcohol and other controlled substances. In a lapse of judgment, after a night of drinking, on a night when his driver was off, he got behind the wheel of his Bentley GT, ultimately ran a stop sign at a high rate of speed, and plowed into Scott Wilson's Hyundai. John made a bad situation worse by leaving the scene. Sadly, Scott was not killed by the impact itself, but he died from drowning a canal with no assistance coming for hours until finally John called 911. John was convicted and sentenced to 16 years in prison and had to pay a large civil settlement. Bernie Madoff. My father died of cancer on November 29, 2008. He was buried the following week in Aspen. In attendance at his funeral were his friends of some 15 years from the Aspen community. Only a week after Dad's service, Bernie Madoff's $64.8 billion Ponzi scheme finally became crashing down with his arrest on December 11, 2008. He pleaded guilty 3 months later and was sentenced to 150 years in prison. Many of the people in attendance at Dad's funeral had their personal fortunes wiped out by a man more focused on appearing than being. There is nothing more important you can take from Episcopal than understanding the essence of its motto, esse quam videre, to be rather than to seem. If you live your life with integrity and are genuine in presentation of your skills, you will do well. That is not to say you might not get away with something sinister for quite a long time, but you will ultimately have to pay the piper. My mom has always struggled to understand what her entrepreneurial son does for a living. When I left the academy and completed all my pre-med courses and took the MCAT, she knew I was going to be a doctor and save lives. At a minimum, I would heal people and make them feel better. Instead of becoming a doctor, I followed into my father's footsteps in business. My decision to not go to medical school can be summed up with, I don't like being around sick people. I had to be honest with myself. I do not possess the healing gift that in my mind a doctor should have. So I chose a different path, much to my mother's chagrin, I might add. At EPM Associates, my new consulting company, simply put, we save corporate lives. We help companies prosper by implementing better processes and controls. In the exciting world of accounting and operations management, there are two guiding principles we adhere to. It is not would someone commit fraud, but could someone commit fraud. It is not impropriety, it is the mere appearance of impropriety that undermines confidence. And each of the anecdotes I presented earlier, had Ken Lay, Jeffrey Skilling, Andrew Fastow, R. Allen Stanford, and Bernie Madoff taken Reverend Squire's ethics class and paid attention, their lives, those of their families, and tens of thousands of lives of employees, investors, and charities might have been saved from ruin and despair. These men deviated from the path of truth and righteousness. They were caught and punished, but they destroyed peace and happiness of so many. That said, had proper controls been in place, their frauds likely would not have occurred in the first place. When my dad was dying, we had multiple conversations on God, death, and what lies beyond. He asked, David, do you believe in God? I said, yes, I do, but I also said I recognize that my understanding was limited by my and humanity's current capacity to understand. I told him to take solace in the fact that no matter what either of us or any human being alive thought today, we were most likely wrong. Our collective comprehension of God on this insignificant planet, the third rock from the sun called Earth, is limited by our experiences and perspective. Seeing as we have such a small glimpse into the actual universe, how can any perspective be definitively correct? Certainly, people shouldn't be killing each other over their disparate views as they have for thousands of years. You shouldn't have to force an ideology onto people. If it is sound, it should hold up to analytical scrutiny. Practically speaking, the basic physics theory of relativity is a relatively new concept. Humanity didn't even understand the basic forces of gravity on objects until Sir Isaac Newton in the early 1600s. With our cosmically short scientific track record, do you honestly think we've got God figured out? I do not. That said, I believe in God. I was raised a Catholic, went to an Episcopal high school, and currently attend a Methodist church. I don't have the definitive answer, but neither does anyone else. What I have is a comfort in knowing that our current representations and explanations are the best we can do with the evidence we have, and they provide a solid framework for peaceful living and coexistence as long as we take a contextual and not literal approach to ancient teachings. Does anyone today really believe that lightning is thrown by Zeus from on top of Mount Olympus? Is anyone 200 to 2,000 years from now going to really say, wow, those guys of the 21st century had it all figured out? They had the internet, smartphones, and everything? While we have as much overall data at our fingertips as possible, we must actually think for ourselves, create new ideas, and turn data into knowledge. Once people stop thinking and give themselves over to rote repeating, the world is in trouble. If you let others do thinking for you, you're copping out on individual responsibility. I don't believe the devil made me do it. The devil may present you some choices, but he doesn't make you do anything. You alone are responsible for your decisions and actions. The gift of attending Episcopal Academy is that it teaches you to think and not merely recite. With free thought, though, comes responsibility. Once you graduate and start to enter the world, rely on the foundations of faith and knowledge you gained here. Know that you're not alone. God and your experiences at Episcopal will be with you forever. Episcopal may not live forever, and your teacher certainly won't be around to give you demerits for misbehaving, assuming they still even do that. But God will always be watching, so behave. I say behave because 10, 20, 30 years on, you want to be able to come back and say to your colleagues, the world is a better place because I'm in it. Not because you made the most money, but because you enriched the lives of others, raised good kids, and helped those in need. On my office wall, I have 5 quotes that form a simple ethic to follow in life and business. The first of which is esse quam videre, to be rather than to seem. So simple, never forget it. Live your life proudly with integrity in whatever endeavor you choose. Be real, have substance, and don't sell others a bill of goods. Second quote is Fix, Close, Sell by Jack Welch. Simple enough to say, tougher to implement. Don't have a messiah complex. You can't fix everything or everyone. You have to know when to move on. Number 3 is no battle plan survives first contact with the enemy, from Helmut von Moltke the Elder. Understand this axiom. It doesn't mean you shouldn't plan. It means that whatever you plan is likely going to change when implemented. Number 4, never be afraid to reinvent yourself, from George Foreman. People of my generation, per the Bureau of Labor Statistics, will have on average 11 jobs. Each job is an opportunity to reinvent yourself. My former administrative assistant is now a vice president at a large energy company, and a former busboy I know now runs one of the largest restaurant operations in America. Number 5, wishing is not a corporate strategy. David M. Cornell, my father. My dad had this quote posted around his office as a reminder to himself and his employees that wishing alone won't get you anything in life. Remember, life is not about can you do something, but should you do something. Can you steal? Yes. Should you steal? No. Can you drive while texting? Yes. Should you drive while texting? No. I had the privilege of attending a speech by Dr. Dan Ariely, an Israeli-American professor of psychology and behavioral economics. He teaches at Duke University, and Dr. Ariely studied and observed, while ethics lectures and training seem to have little to no effect on people, reminders of morality, right at the point where people are making a decision, appear to have an outsized effect on people. Ariely's experiments demonstrated that having regular recurring reminders of what to do are far more effective than being told what not to do. Increasing the reminders of behavior that is expected favorably impacts the behaviors that will occur. If we showcase expected behaviors ourselves, we become reminders to others by our examples of the right thing to do. Conversely, Ariely's experiments and observations also conclude that if we have or associate with others around us who clearly cheat, the mere presence of cheaters will definitely increase the likelihood of more cheating. In closing, I'm not going to tell you what to do or what not to do. I simply recommend that you find your own quotes and sayings and put them on your wall to remind you daily of the right course. After you leave Episcopal, you will no longer see the outsized esse quam videre appropriately etched into the wall of the chapel, but never forget the words or their meaning or the lessons learned in chapel. Remember, and remember this well, life is a series of pop quizzes and not a final exam. Always be prepared to demonstrate what you know and how to act. Take Episcopal spirit with you wherever you go. And lastly, if you get a chance to take Reverend Squire's ethics class, pay attention. It will serve you well. Thanks for your time.